My father left me a voicemail telling me I was out of the family. 46 missed calls later, they realized who actually held the keys to everything they were standing on. My name is Riley Callahan. I'm 33. That morning, my dad had told me by voicemail that I was done. You're out. Don't come back. We're moving on without you. I played it once. I didn't play it twice. I looked at my phone for a long minute. Then I typed one word back. Okay. What none of them remembered while they were busy moving on without me was that I was the trustee of my mother's trust. And the farmhouse they were standing in? The 160 acres my great-grandfather built with his own hands? That land didn't belong to them. It belonged to my mother's memory. And I was the one holding the pen. Welcome back to Family and Power Story Show. If you've ever been the one holding your whole family together right up until they decided you were disposable, you'll want to hear how this one ends. Drop a comment and hit subscribe. Let me back up. I run a little bookkeeping and tax shop on Main Street in Millbrook, Indiana. Population just under 4,000. I do payroll for the feed store, quarterly filings for 2 churches, and the books for half the farms in the county. People call me when the numbers stop adding up. When the IRS sends a letter that makes their hands sweat. I'm the one who reads the fine print out loud and slow. Turns out my own family was a number that hadn't added up in a while. I learned the work the hard way. I was 20 when my mother got sick. I left school to drive her to Indianapolis 3 days a week, 90 minutes each way, a thermos between us. I learned trusts and tax law at her kitchen table because somebody had to understand the paperwork, and the lawyers charged by the question. My mom's name was Carol. She had dirt under her nails and a head for figures. She taught me that a ledger doesn't lie, even when people do. When the cancer came back the second time, she sat me down at that same table and made me trustee of the family trust. Not my dad. Me. The trust held the home place. 160 acres, and the farmhouse my great-grandfather built with his own hands. I didn't understand back then why she chose me over her own husband. I figured she was just being practical because I was the one who read the documents twice. I'd find out exactly why she did it. But not for 2.5 years. And not until the morning everything came apart. My mother died on a Tuesday in October. My father came undone in a way I wasn't ready for. Tom Callahan had been married to her for 36 years. He didn't know how to make coffee. He didn't know which bills were on autopay. For about a year, I drove the 12 miles out to the farm every other day just to keep him upright. I balanced his checkbook. I refilled his pills. I sat with him through the hardest suppers, the holidays, her birthday. I told myself this was what daughters did. Near the end, Mom had told me her worst fear wasn't dying. It was leaving him behind soft-hearted and alone. Because she said a lonely man with land is a target. And she wouldn't be there to stand between him and the wrong person. I thought she was just tired and rambling. Then he met Patricia at a church potluck 2 counties over. They married 13 months after the funeral. It happened so fast the neighbors hadn't finished dropping off casseroles. Patricia Voss was 54, twice divorced, sharp-eyed and friendly in the way of people who are always counting the exits. She moved into the farmhouse. Her grown son Kyle moved in 3 weeks after that, into my old bedroom, with his motorcycle parts on the porch. I tried to be glad. I really did. A lonely man had someone again, and that should have been a good thing. But something curdled in my dad that first winter. He started saying things like, "Your mother left the place to you and not me. Like I'm a renter on my own farm." He said it lightly, the way you say a thing you've been chewing on for months. Patricia never argued. She just nodded slow and let it sit in the room. I should have measured back. The house in town was Patricia's idea. A 4-bedroom on Sycamore Street asking $240,000, with a porch she said reminded her of her childhood. They wanted to sell the back 40 to pay for it. The back 40 wasn't theirs to sell. It belonged to the trust. I didn't want to fight. So I bent. I offered to put $60,000 of my own money toward the down payment. A gift, no strings. And I told them I'd look hard at a partial sale of the acreage if we did it properly. An appraisal, a notice to the other beneficiary, a sit-down with the trust attorney. That's not me being difficult. That's just how you don't get sued later. Patricia didn't hear yes carefully. She heard delay. One evening over pot roast, She set a stack of papers by my plate and said, smooth as butter. Your mother's dead, honey. This is our family now. My dad studied his fork. Kyle smirked into his phone. I felt the temperature in that kitchen drop 10 degrees. To them, my signature wasn't a safeguard. It was a formality they expected me to perform, like passing the rolls. The trouble was, I'd read the trust 100 times. A formality was the one thing it would never be. It came to a head over that pot roast 2 weeks before their closing date. Patricia slid the sale agreement across the table and tapped the signature line with one polished nail. We just need you to sign here. The closing's the 18th. My dad finally looked up. It's all arranged. Dale Pruitt drew it up. Dale Pruitt. My father's golf buddy of 20 years who happened to have a law license. I kept my voice even. I can't sign this tonight. Patricia's smile didn't move. Why on earth not? Because it's trust land. There's a process. An appraisal, a notice to the beneficiaries. I'm not allowed to just sign it away. Kyle muttered something about me thinking I was better than everybody. Patricia set down her fork. So you're going to hold up your father's whole life over paperwork? Over my mother's instructions, I said. It's not the same thing. My dad's jaw worked. He didn't say anything. That was the part that hollowed me out. Not the anger. The silence. I drove the 12 miles back to town. Headlights on empty county road. I didn't cry. Crying wasn't going to balance anyone's books. He called the next morning at 6:42 while I was parked outside my own shop. I didn't pick up in time. So it went to voicemail. And that's the message I told you about at the start. Riley, we talked it over. You're out. Don't come back. We're moving on without you. Then faint, almost swallowed, Patricia in the background. Tell her about the trust. A pause. My dad's voice again lower. We'll deal with the trust. Click. I sat with my thumb over the screen. There's a particular kind of still that comes over you when a person you love hands you something you can't ever unreceive. I typed one word. The only honest word I had. Okay. People hear okay and think it means giving up. Mine meant the opposite. It meant I was done spending my own life propping up people who just told me on a recording I'd keep forever that I wasn't family. For 30 months I'd been bending so the family wouldn't break. That morning they broke it themselves. So I stopped holding. And the first thing a person does when she finally stops holding something that heavy is set it down. I just happened to be holding more than they realized. Here's what I did before lunch. First, the $60,000. That was my money sitting in my savings, promised as a gift toward a house I was no longer welcome in. The deal hadn't closed. A gift you haven't given is still yours. I emailed Dale Pruitt. Please be advised I am withdrawing my offered down payment contribution effective immediately. Then I called my bank and confirmed not $1 had moved. Second, the trust. As trustee, I wasn't going to be rushed into selling the back 40 under a closing deadline I never agreed to. So I started the process correctly. I formally noticed the appraisal. I logged the request. And I declined to authorize any sale until that process was complete. That's not a weapon. That's a trustee doing her actual job. But to people counting on my speed, slow lands like a slammed door. I want to be honest about the feeling. It wasn't triumphant. It was quiet and a little cold. Like the first hard frost after a long warm fall. I put my phone on silent to run payroll. When I flipped it over after, the screen looked like a slot machine that had stopped on bad news. 46 missed calls. 31 from my dad. 9 from a number I didn't know. The rest from Patricia. And one text from Dale Pruitt sent at 9:52 that morning. Riley, we have a serious problem. Call me before you do anything else. I set the phone face down on the counter. A serious problem. He wasn't wrong exactly. He just had the ownership of it backward. See, a man who tells his daughter not to come back 12 hours before he needs her $60,000 and her signature? That man has a serious problem. It's just not mine. I finished Mrs. Albright's tax forms. I double-checked her withholding. I walked her to the door and told her to say hi to her grandkids. Then I poured a second cup of coffee. And I felt something I hadn't felt in 2.5 years. I felt like I could breathe all the way down to the bottom. The one thing I did next was call my own lawyer. Not Dale. Dale was my father's man. Gwen Hollis had drawn up my mother's trust. She was 60, gray-braided, and allergic to nonsense. I drove over and laid it out plain. The dinner, the voicemail, the $60,000 I'd pulled, the appraisal I'd noticed. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she folded her hands. Let me tell you where you stand. The money was yours. You can give a gift or not give a gift right up until it leaves your account. Nobody can force you. She tapped the trust binder. And as trustee, you are not only allowed to refuse a rushed sale, you are required to do it carefully. That's the job. Then she paused. There's something else. Your mother left a sealed side letter with the firm when she signed the trust. Her own written instructions, signed and dated, telling us to release it to you only if a dispute ever came up over the land. She looked at me over her glasses. It looks like there's a fight over the land. My mouth went dry. What's in it? I never opened it, Gwen said. Carol's handwriting on the front. Just your name. She slid it across the desk. I didn't pick it up. Not yet. First, Patricia came to my shop. She did it on a Friday at lunch, when she knew the place would be full. The bell over the door jingled. There she was in a coat too nice for our town, raising her voice before she'd even reached the counter. Well, here she is, she announced to the room. The daughter who abandoned her grieving father over a piece of dirt. 3 of my clients sat in my waiting chairs. Every one of them stopped pretending not to listen. Hi, Patricia, I said. Can I help you with something? You can sign the papers is what you can do. She planted herself in the middle of my shop. You're tearing this family apart. Your mother would be ashamed of you. I came around the counter slow and held the door open for her. I've got clients. If you'd like to talk, Gwen Hollis can set up a meeting with the lawyers present. She swept out. The bell jingled behind her. I turned back to my waiting room. Mrs. Tilden, who'd buried 2 husbands and feared no one, looked at me and said, Your mama would not be ashamed of you, baby. She'd be proud. Small towns talk. I let them. By Sunday, half the county had heard Patricia's version. By Monday, the other half had heard Mrs. Tilden's. My dad's calls changed shape after that. He left a voicemail Sunday night, and his voice cracked in the middle of it. You're killing this family, Riley. Your mother would be ashamed. We raised you better. I sat on my kitchen floor with my back against the cabinets and listened to it twice. I'm not going to lie and say it bounced off. It didn't. There's no part of you so well defended that your father saying your dead mother would be ashamed of you doesn't find a soft spot and press. I wanted to fix it. But I'd learned something running other people's books for 10 years. When your hands are shaking, you don't make the entry from memory. You go to the source document. So I pulled out the trust. I read again in my mother's plain language exactly what my job was. It steadied me better than any pep talk could have. I texted my dad one line, I love you. I'm still following Mom's trust. He didn't answer. While I was holding my line, their whole plan was quietly catching fire. Without my $60,000, and without any trust money, my dad and Patricia were short on a house they had already promised to buy. The sellers had a backup offer and no patience. Their agent sent Dale a letter. Close on the 18th as agreed, or forfeit the $15,000 earnest money and face a claim for their costs. $15,000. My dad didn't have $15,000. Almost none of it had ever been his money. It was supposed to be the land's money and mine. I heard the worst of it from Aunt Vi, my mother's younger sister. He's not sleeping, she told me. Sits on the porch half the night. Patricia's at him all day about where the money went. I felt that pull. The one that had run my life for 30 months. He was my father, and he was suffering, and I had a checkbook. But I finally understood something. I hadn't caused this. They had spent money that was never theirs on a promise they'd extracted from a person they then threw away at 6 in the morning. I told Aunt Vi I loved her and I loved him, and I was still not going to sign. She was quiet a second. Then she said, Good. Gwen called me on a Wednesday and asked me to come read the letter. I'd been avoiding it. You don't have to, she said. But Carol wrote it for exactly this. I drove over after I closed the shop. The letter sat on her desk. A plain white envelope gone soft at the corners from sitting in a file for 4 years. My name on the front in my mother's slanted, careful hand. I picked it up and didn't open it. Why'd she think there'd be a fight? Gwen took off her glasses. Your mother was sick, not blind. She knew your father. She loved him, and she knew exactly what he'd do if he got lonely and somebody got in his ear. She nodded at the envelope. She wasn't protecting the land from him. She was protecting him from himself. And she picked you to do it. My mother had been dead 2.5 years. She still wasn't done talking. I sat down in the chair across from Gwen, the chair my mother had signed her trust in. And I turned the envelope over in my hands. I thought about all the people who told me that month what my mother would or wouldn't think of me. Patricia, my dad, half the church. Now here was Mom herself, in her own hand, about to weigh in. I opened it slow. One page, both sides, blue ink. She started the way she always did. No fuss. Riley Bug, if Gwen's giving you this, then it's happened. And I'm sorry I'm not there to take the heat with you. I had to stop and breathe before I could go on. Then she told me why. I didn't make you trustee because you're the smart one. Though you are. I made you trustee because you're the only one in this family who can say no to your father and still love him in the same breath. He can't say no to himself. He never could. Someday somebody's going to come along and want this land turned into cash. And they'll get to him when he's weak. It won't be what we want. There's something I never told you, Riley. My own mother lost her daddy's farm exactly this way. A second husband, a sweet smile. A deed signed at a kitchen table before anybody could stop it. I was 9. We rented rooms after that. And she grieved that ground until the day she died. I made you trustee so you'd be the one standing where nobody stood for her. Keep the place whole, baby. Not for the dirt. For the next people who'll need somewhere that didn't get sold off in a bad season. And listen to me. The day they tell you you're not family, that's the day you'll know I was right to pick you. Family doesn't put you out for doing the job they trusted you with. So don't you dare feel guilty. You're not the one who left. I read it 3 times. I sat in that chair and I didn't make a sound. But something that had been crouched in my chest for 30 months stood all the way up and walked out. I never knew about my grandmother's farm. She'd carried that loss her whole life and never once said it out loud. She'd been afraid of this for years. Not the exact morning, she was no fortune teller, but the shape of it. She hadn't been being practical when she chose me. She'd been handing me a backbone and a reason. I folded the letter and put it in my own breast pocket, over my heart. Okay, Mom, I said. This time the word meant something brand new. With the letter in my pocket, I finally let Gwen translate Dale's serious problem into plain English. She read his texts and almost laughed. He's blowing smoke. He says you interfered with the purchase and you might be liable as trustee. Both wrong. The $60,000 was a personal gift you hadn't made. You can't interfere with a sale by declining to hand over your own money. That's not interference. That's just keeping your money. She held up a second finger. And as trustee, declining to rush a sale of trust property while you follow the appraisal process? That's not a breach. That's the opposite. You'd be in trouble if you'd signed it away in a weekend to make your dad's girlfriend happy. She set the letter down. The serious problem, Riley, is that Dale let his client sign a purchase contract spending money that wasn't his and that was never promised in writing. That's a problem. It's just not yours. So when he says we have a serious problem, he means they do, Gwen said. And he's hoping you don't know the difference. I told Gwen to send Dale a short reply. 3 lines, no heat. I had nothing to discuss outside a properly noticed meeting with counsel present, and my position was simply that I was following the trust. When the guilt didn't work and the gossip didn't work, they reached for the only lever they had left. Dale Pruitt sent a letter on actual letterhead, the kind meant to make your stomach drop. It said my father intended to petition the court to remove me as trustee for breach of fiduciary duty. Kyle took a picture of it and posted it on Facebook with the caption, "Getting our land back. Some people forget who family is." I read the letter twice. The word court does something to a person, even when you're in the right. I took it straight to Gwen. She read it slower than the last one, then put it down and looked at me with something close to satisfaction. Now they've actually told us their hand. To remove a trustee, you go to court and prove cause. Bad faith, self-dealing, wasting assets, ignoring the document. She ticked them off. Did you take a dime of trust money for yourself? No. Did you sell anything, lose anything, hide anything? No. Did you follow your mother's instrument and order a proper appraisal? Yes. She spread her hands. Then there's nothing to remove you for. No judge is going to remove a trustee for being careful. It landed clean. The whole month I'd been carrying this low dread that maybe somehow I was the one in the wrong. Gwen had just shown me the ledger, and my side balanced. So what do? I asked. You offer them a fair way out. On the record. Not because you owe them, because it's right. And because when they turn it down, and they will, there will be no doubt left about who is reasonable. I liked that. It sounded like something my mother would have done. So I offered them a fair path in writing through Gwen. I wrote that I would consider a partial sale of the acreage at a proper appraised value, with proceeds handled through the trust. Some of those proceeds could go towards suitable housing for my father. I asked for exactly 2 things in return. A real appraisal, and that the talk about putting me out of the family stop. Gwen sent it over. We heard back in a day. The answer came from Patricia, not my dad. And it came through Dale. And it was no. Not a counteroffer. Not let's talk. Just no. Because Dale wrote his clients would not accept conditions dictated by Miss Callahan. Conditions. I'd offered to fund my father's house and a fair appraisal. And the only condition they couldn't stomach was being asked to stop telling people I wasn't family. Dale called the meeting himself, 3 days before the closing date he was about to blow. He framed it as a chance to resolve everything before this gets out of hand. He said it at his own office, Thursday at 10. I told Gwen yes. And I wanted her beside me. And I wanted us 5 minutes early. Why? She asked. Because I want to, I said. And because I'm done managing this family in private. I want it said in the open on the record. Thursday morning, I laid out my best blazer, the navy one. I made sure my mother's letter was still in the breast pocket. Then I drove to Dale's office. Dale's conference room had a long table that was trying too hard. When Gwen and I walked in at 5 till 10, the room was already fuller than I expected. My father sat at the far end, smaller than I remembered, hands flat on the table. Patricia beside him in a red blazer, chin up. Kyle slouched against the wall. Dale at the head. And 2 people I hadn't expected. A young woman from the bank. And a brisk woman with a leather portfolio, who turned out to be the seller's agent. Dale had brought witnesses. He thought he was bringing pressure. What he'd actually done was guarantee that whatever got said in this room got said in front of people with no reason to lie about it later. Dale cleared his throat. Well, he said, opening his folder. Let's see if we can talk some sense into things. He looked over his glasses at me, not at Gwen. The way you look at the weakest seat at the table. Riley, you've created quite a situation. He laid it out. Your father and Patricia entered a binding agreement. You undermined it. You withdrew a committed contribution at the 11th hour. You've exposed this family to real financial harm. Now we can resolve this today if you'll authorize the parcel sale. Or we proceed with the petition to remove you. Patricia nodded like a metronome. Kyle smirked. The fan ticked overhead. The easiest thing on earth would have been to pick up the pen and make it stop. I didn't reach for the pen. I reached for my own folder. I'm not going to authorize the sale today, I said. My voice came out level. And before anyone files anything, we should all be looking at the same facts. I laid the first page where everyone could see it. This is my mother's trust. I'm the trustee. It requires an appraisal and notice before any sale. I ordered the appraisal. I gave the notice. I haven't sold, and I haven't refused to sell. I've declined to skip the steps the document requires. That's not a breach. That's the job. I laid down the second page. This is the $60,000. It was my personal money, a gift I offered and had not yet given. I withdrew it in writing before any closing. You can't interfere with a sale by keeping your own money in your own account. Gwen spoke once, quiet. A trustee following the trust instrument and a private citizen declining to make a gift are both acting entirely within their rights. There is no cause for removal here. The bank officer was nodding before she caught herself. The seller's agent had stopped taking notes and was just listening. I turned the last page toward the middle of the table. Here's the actual serious problem. Somebody signed a purchase contract for $240,000 spending money that wasn't his, that nobody ever committed in writing. When that money didn't appear, the contract was always going to collapse. That's not something I did to you. That's something you did to yourselves. Patricia stood up so fast her chair barked against the floor. You ungrateful little. Her face had come apart. Your father took you to every appointment. He raised you. And the second he needs you, you slam the door and hide behind your dead mother and your paperwork. She slapped her hand flat on the table. Your mother is dead, Riley. This is our family now, and you are not going to ruin it. The room went dead silent. My father finally looked up at me. I held his eyes, not Patricia's, when I answered. I didn't stand. I didn't raise my voice. You're right. My mother's gone. I know. I was there. A beat. That's exactly why her trust answers to me and not to you. She wrote it that way on purpose while she was alive, because she knew this day was coming. I turned to my dad. You left me a voicemail. You told me I was out. You said move on without me. So I did, Dad. You can't put your family out at 6 in the morning and still own her at 10. He didn't have an answer. There isn't one. Kyle had stopped smirking. Patricia stood there in her red blazer, breathing hard. I gave them the way out one more time. On the record, in front of every witness. Here's where we are. I slid my written offer to the center of the table. I'll fund suitable housing for my father out of a proper appraised partial sale handled through the trust. The home place stays. And the talk about me not being family stops today. That's the same offer I made last week. Take it, and we all go home lighter. For one breath, I thought my dad might reach for it. Then Patricia, who could not let me be the reasonable one, said tight and low, we're not taking conditions from her. And my father, given the chance to choose his daughter or his pride one more time, looked down at the table and said nothing. So the deal was dead. The $15,000 was gone. The Sycamore Street house would belong to the backup buyers by Friday. They'd done all of that to themselves in this room, with witnesses, after I'd handed them a rope twice. I gathered my file, slow and neat. I stood. I didn't slam anything. I didn't gloat. At the door, I turned just once and looked at the people who'd told me I was out. I gave them the same word I'd given them that morning in the truck. Okay, I said. And I left. Here's how it shook out. In the plain numbers I trust more than feelings. The Sycamore Street deal collapsed. My father and Patricia lost their $15,000 in earnest money and got a bill from the seller's lawyer on top of it. The house in town never happened. Dale talked them out of the petition to remove me once he'd had a few days to think. There was no cause to put in it. The 160 acres and the farmhouse and my mother's row of oaks are still whole. Still in the trust. Still doing exactly what she wanted them to do. My father still lives in that farmhouse. The trust provides for him, and I never touched that. Even the morning he forgot to be fair to me. Patricia and Kyle moved out by the end of summer. I heard the marriage didn't survive a winter without the new house she'd been promised. Aunt Vi still brings me casseroles I don't need and stories I do. The Methodist ladies came back around. The way small towns do once the truth has had a season to settle. My dad and I talk now and then. Short calls on my terms with the door open just a crack. It isn't what it was. It may never be. But I sleep through the night, and my books balance. If there's one thing I'd want you to take from all this, it's that when someone mistakes your calm for weakness, you don't have to correct them out loud. Calm is just what strength looks like once it's already decided. That's my story. One voicemail, one word back, and a piece of land my mother trusted me to keep whole. If this reminded you that holding a boundary isn't cruelty, it's care with a spine, then take that as your sign. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. Drop a comment. Hit subscribe. And I'll see you in the next one.